pumping groundwater entirely for the survival of this town. There's not even surface water here. So, and the town is growing exponentially. This whole region is growing exponentially, and we're using water exponentially. So there's going to be a certain point where we can't support the amount of water use we put into place with the amount of water we have. A watershed is a specific area, right? A surface area that drains to a specific point. And these little branches, they all come together and they form, eventually from, arroyo to wash to creek to river. And then finally from the river, eventually it disperses once again, ultimately out into the ocean. Okay. So this is just a basic pattern of the way that water flows throughout the landscape. You can draw a line around this mountain range and you'd say, oh, this is my watershed. This is the area of land that is draining to any one particular point, right? So when you're assessing a property for your potential water harvesting capacity, you're breaking it down into watershed sections. Water also comes to us through electricity. Electricity comes to us through coal and nuclear. So it's not just water. We're talking about pumping water, moving water for great distances to our cities. We're not just talking about the water itself. We're talking about the other energy it takes to get it there. And so if we are going to maintain as a species, if humans are going to survive, then we're going to have to do things that are in harmony with natural systems. And we definitely have the capacity to massively whittle down our water consumption if we broad scale adopted rainwater harvesting strategies by itself and then got into the house and started dealing with the interior systems. So it's hopeful, because everybody's going, oh, these water problems, and they have all these big political things, we're draining the water from the Verde, and it's all this big. I'm like, hello, the answers are small, and it's in everybody's hands. When I get a big rain, you see where you guys are standing, I actually graded this land down, picked away, and actually made it so this all slopes and created a basin right here, which is deeply mulched, and then planted with edible, flowering, nitrogen-fixing plants. So we're collecting the water. We're also collecting leaves. All these leaves, I didn't put these leaves here. These leaves are just finding their way into the low spot, right? We've got plants, so it's creating a little more privacy, right? I'm also growing plants, especially I planted taller things that are going to grow up on this northwest side of my property for that setting summer sun. It's going to be shielded by these taller trees here, okay? I'm also growing food. This is an almond tree. That's a wild plum rootstock to graft onto. That's an apple. I've got another wild plum. There's a pear. I've got all this wildlife habitat. I've got all this food production. I've got privacy. I've got shade. I've got beauty. And then ultimately when this thing starts to produce, I'm going to have people walking down the street, and imagine the whole street has these street side orchards. You're going to have food hanging over the street. So you get a whole nother level of invisible structures, community, social elements. That's where the permaculture part comes in, where you're increasing the beneficial, you're benefiting life for everybody. So this is a branch drain gray water system. So what's happening is when I do a load of laundry, it's coming out, and first it's hitting this branch right here, and then so 50% is flowing here, and then again the water's splitting perfectly equally. And then it's going into these infiltration basins, these mulch-filled infiltration basins. All this is a 5-gallon bucket with the top cut off and holes drilled in, okay? And you can see that the pipe comes here, so when the water comes out, right, it free falls into this basin surrounded by wood chips. So these wood chips are like a sponge. So the water free falls into the sponge, and then around the sponge I have all different types of plantings, kind of an apple hedge right here. And a woody perennial has the ability to take up and actually bind pollutants in its wood. And so that a tree and a woody plant is actually one of the most effective biofilters, way more of an effective biofilter than anything that we could create. If we don't evolve, we're going to destroy ourselves. I mean, we're well on the way to destruction, you know? So we need to make a leap in consciousness, and that leap in consciousness needs to be reflected in the way that we use and collaborate with our resources. These pipes used to go directly and pour into the creek before we disconnected them here. So that's the goal of conventional engineering, is to go from source to sink as fast as possible. Okay? But the goal of dynamic water harvesting is to go from source and to move the water back and forth across the landscape as many times as possible before you get to the sink. When you create the structure that captures water and it captures organic material, and birds come and they deposit seeds in their manure, you actually get the opposite effect of like entropy. In entropy, you say energy is dispersing in entropy. When you create a permaculture system that actually collects energy, it's like algeny. It's like things begin to gather in your system on their own. So this system has been sitting here passively gathering water, collecting hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, I don't know, of gallons of water over the last 8 years. And if you tucked these little systems like here all over Prescott, you would actually have a dramatic increase on the water table. This actually keeps water around. Instead of rushing off in a flash down to the lake, it percolates and actually makes more water, more groundwater available for vegetation and for human use. So I'm trying to inspire the creativity to wake people up, and it's happening, you know. But like, it really needs to happen. You know, the writing it's not very dimly on the wall. It's pretty blatant at this point, and we need like a massive, like, revolutionary cultural shift to dealing with the problems instead of creating more problems.